we did it, Dave.
Kind of.
Kind of. Well, I mean, almost. We survived. We survived 2021.
Yeah, we did. It was definitely a challenging year. I mean, we had a podcast a couple of months ago talking, or at least you were talking about how it was one of the most challenging years for you.
Yeah.
I kind of took a little bit more moderate point of view and said it was hard, but not my hardest ever. But definitely it was a hard year. Just, I don't know if it was the hardest ever.
I mean, again, I don't want to get too down this rabbit hole because you can go back and we'll link to the show notes for the episode we're talking about. But I don't do well with things that I can't control. And so hard can mean a few different things. It can mean having to work 20-hour days, or it can mean just sitting on the sideline and watching things kind of crumble around you and not be able to do much about it. And, I'd rather have an opportunity to go work the 20-hour day. I don't want to have to do it forever. I try to balance things better now, but at least I know that I can fix it with brute force. This year has been a bunch of everything that I can't control, like climaxing into one year. And it's been tough. It's also been tough for the podcast. The podcast has had an interesting year. We have grown this podcast every year since we started. We had a fun milestone this year. We have passed 1 million downloads, which is just freaking frightening to even think about that number. But it's also the first year that the overall listenership has contracted, which is kind of a bummer as well.
Yeah, well, I actually have the overall total downloads here for the year. And the tricky thing with podcasts is it's always really hard to track. So with the Ecom Crew blog, it's totally granular when we track it. So Google Analytics tells us every single visitor, how long they stayed on the site, what they did after they came to a particular page, and a million other metrics that you can track. With the podcast, it's so difficult because everyone consumes their podcasts on different platforms. Some people consume them on iTunes. Some people consume them on the website. Some people are on whatever. And there's really no all-in-one conclusive tracking system like there is with website traffic and Google Analytics. So anytime we look at data, it's kind of only a partial picture, and we don't always know exactly what we're looking at when we look at that data.
Yeah, and I think that maybe some of the decrease, like we try to look at the same number for consistency year over year, realizing that there's other numbers out there to look at. But the same number that we've been tracking for since day one has gone down this year, which is a bummer. I attribute it to a bunch of different things. I mean, COVID has to be one of them, right? I don't want to blame everything on COVID, but COVID has reduced the number of events, live events, and I think that new blood comes in through seeing us speak at particular events. I wasn't at Global Sources this year, and wasn't at Ecom Crew or E-commerce Fuel Live or Seller Summit. All these things were canceled this year. They're all coming back next year, hopefully. At least I've signed up for one of those events or two of them. And so we'll see what happens from that perspective. I also think that people's lives have been disrupted in a pretty dramatic way. I mean, I know that I used to listen to podcasts while I was traveling quite a bit. I would download them on my iPhone and listen to them on the plane. I would kind of binge them. I would listen to them on an evening walk.
When you're at the gym.
And I think that however people fit podcasts into their lives, that changed. Whether that was like on their daily commute. Well, maybe now they're working from home, or maybe it was going to the gym. Well, the gyms have been closed. So there's, I think, a lot of things that can be attributed there. It's still a bummer. People like myself that like to win and don't ever like to see anything go backwards. It is a bummer. So anyway, I guess if you're listening, tell a friend about the Ecom Crew podcast and help us start off 2022 on a good note.
Sure. And last thing, I guess, before we hop into the top 10. So I have the numbers in front of me from Libsyn, and Libsyn is the closest thing to Google Analytics that we use to track the podcast and its performance. And any idea, Mike, on the number of downloads for 2021, looking at the 78 podcasts that were released this year?
I don't know, 300,000.
Close. 195,000. Now, Libsyn, they did definitely ratchet down their overall numbers this year because of the fact that, number one, I think iOS actually affected tracking a little bit. People were consuming on different devices, and Libsyn just basically got an even less complete picture this year for whatever reason. But for 2021, from Libsyn, we're looking at 195,000 downloads, which to me is actually shocking. Like, that's almost 250,000 people that are listening to your voice every day. And I mean, pitiful people.
Well, we've really helped people get a better night's sleep, which is the most important thing. So,
Just as a little side note, a couple of weeks ago, I was falling asleep, and normally I'm probably like most people, and I fall asleep to a podcast, and I put my sleep timer on for 30 minutes, and I listened to some other podcast, not the Ecom Crew podcast. Anyways, that night I forgot to put my sleep timer on, and I woke up at about 4 a.m. to the voice of you in my dreams. I was like, oh God, what is this? So quickly, anyways, I turned off my phone, went back to sleep, and had nightmares for the rest of the night.
that explains a few things.
Yeah, it does.
But we are over 1 million downloads now, right? What is is there a total download number you have there?
I haven't looked at that, but I would imagine being 6 years into this, it has to be above a million.
I know we
downloads.
crossed. I remember when Ben told me we crossed it. I forgot exactly. I think that was this year. It feels like it was this year. Maybe it was last year. I don't even remember. This year really has gone by like a blur. It's really weird, but.